Hey, good morning. Good Friday to you all. I hope this morning is starting well for you. Good Friday was always an interesting thing for me because the name is just kind of a misnomer to me. Because it's Good Friday for who? If we really read the story and understand all that's happening, and I think we probably all do, it was a pretty rough day. Very difficult for the disciples, for those that were closest to Jesus, his friends, his family. Extremely obviously difficult for Jesus. So, in light of the changes that we are experiencing now and not being able to have a traditional Good Friday service, I thought it might be beneficial then to just spend 5 minutes every hour on the hour in the text and just kind of marinate in the garden with Jesus to really join him there. So that's the plan every hour to go for 5 minutes and just allow his word to just prepare our hearts and minds for Resurrection Sunday. It's easy to jump right to the celebration because this is a difficult part of the story, but I think it's extremely valuable. So let me read you. We're going to be in Luke 22 today, verses 39 through 46. So let me just read them to you and then we'll break them down as we go. Verse 39 says, "Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, 'Pray that you will not give in to temptation.' He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, 'Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine.' Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. At last he stood up again and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. 'Why are you sleeping?' he asked them. 'Get up and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation.'" And this little bit of the story here in the garden, this glimpse that we get, is sandwiched between the Last Supper and then Jesus' arrest, which then ultimately leads to his torture and execution. What I think is interesting here is in verse 39, which we're going to look at here for the next 2 or 3 minutes, is he says, accompanied by the disciples, as Luke records this, Jesus left the upstairs room, right, where they had the Last Supper, and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. Those words, as usual, I think are impactful. At least they were for me. Because in the midst of what was happening, they had just celebrated the Passover supper, the Last Supper as we know it. Jesus redefined the elements there, breaking the bread, saying it would be his body, using the cup as his blood, telling them that they wouldn't celebrate this again with him, that he was going to experience this time that Judas at the table would betray him, that Peter would deny him. Everything would start to seem like it was beginning to unravel, and yet Jesus did what he always did. As normal, he went to the Mount of Olives as usual. But I think what makes this interesting is as things were about as abnormal as they had ever been, Jesus stayed with what was normal for him. He had a place he went to, the Garden of Gethsemane. We know it was in the Mount of Olives. Luke 11 tells us that he went there every night. So there was this place that he had. He went there with people. He was surrounded by his disciples. The other gospel writers record that, the inner three, Peter, James, and John, went with him even closer. And likely those are the ones that he's talking to about sleeping. So he had his people with him. He was in this place that he normally went to. So he had this rhythm in his life, surrounded by those that were closest to him. And he did what he normally would do, and he prayed. He saw that his relationship with the Father was a priority, and he did as usual in the midst of a situation that was anything but usual. And we find ourselves at times in situations that are abnormal and not usual, and we can easily go into panic mode. And as things start to unravel, we start to unravel. And I'm encouraged by this text, really, just the beginning of this as we start this day together, that Jesus focused on his relationship with the Father. It was a priority. And it just happened that these all came out as P. I promise I don't try to do this stuff. But he had a priority with the Father. He prayed. There was communication between them. He had a place. He had a practice, this rhythm in his life to go there with these people to do this thing, to pray. So I challenge you to think about the things that when we experience them, and maybe some of us are now in the height of this coronavirus and this pandemic situation. Do we have a place that we go to? Are there people that we surround ourselves with? And is God a priority? Is prayer part of our daily rhythm? Is it a practice? We're going to get into the prayer here in a couple hours, but is there a place? Are there people? And is prayer a priority? Is it part of our rhythm, our practice? Because our relationship with God is. I will see you guys in about 55 minutes as we look at verse 40. I pray this day goes well for all of us as God does what only He can and use His word to change us. So I will talk to you soon.